caller. Here they come.
Good evening and welcome to Green Watch Live. I am Treasje Mitchell, your host. We are joined by Pete Salas. He is the candidate for Texas State Representative, District 126, and Elvonte Patton, a former runner for school board trustee. Good evening, guys. Welcome to the show. So, Pete, tell us more about your campaign.
Oh, I'm running for us for House District 126. It's a Texas state legislature position, so we're going to be dealing with the state and not with the U.S. Congress. So it's two different things.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, it's going to be a good run. The election's going to be next year, so this is all going to be leading up to the one final vote.
Okay, and you're running with the Libertarian Party?
Yes, I'm running with the Libertarian Party.
And how long have you been a part of that party?
I've been part of the party for about 2 years now, but I've known about the party for a while. It was the party that I made the final decision to join. I've been looking at other parties before, didn't really like what they stood for. I considered myself an independent for a very long time, and these last elections actually helped me kind of evolve politically, and that's kind of where it led to.
Awesome. Can you tell us more about the Libertarian Party and why you decided to go with them?
Well, the Libertarian Party, I would say you take out everything bad that you don't like, and it's all the good from both the Democrat and the Republican Party. It's maximum freedom, and autonomy basically. What we try to do, the message that a lot of libertarians try to convey, is self-determination, and
Awesome.
autonomy.
Sounds great. Thank you. Elvante,
Yes, ma'am.
can you tell us more about your run for school board trustee or other political endeavors you may have?
So I chose to run for Harris County Department of Education, school board trustee at large, because I felt like education truly needed a voice at the table. As I saw, it wasn't many African Americans sitting at the table, and I seen the struggle within the black and brown community when it came down to education. Also, I'm a doctoral candidate. I finished in May with my doctorate degree, so I got to
Congratulations.
do a lot of research and see the underlining issues of what's really going on in education. So I took a step forward and said, that's what I'm going to do. Ultimately, before then, I had no aspirations of running at all. Didn't really like politics, but now I understand that politics kind of run the world, and all of us need to have a hand in some way, somehow. So I felt like, why not me? Because I felt like I can be an example for a lot of young people that have aspirations of changing the world one way or another. But my future aspirations, I'm exploring an opportunity of running for state rep as well, because I feel like laws need to be changed, and I'm tired of us being reactive rather than being proactive. And I think a lot of the issues that we're having is we're looking backwards instead of looking forward. So I feel like it's time for more young people to get in office to actually create laws that's really affecting us today rather than who was affecting my grandmother yesterday.
Exactly. Okay. Great. Great. I'm happy to hear that. So I saw that you do activist work, feeding the homeless. You're currently a teacher. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you tell us more about your work in the community?
So about 3 years ago, I lost my job. And when I lost my job, I felt like the only way to truly get back on my feet was to give to others. Because I feel like a lot of times we dig into self and say everything's happening to me. Why is this happening to me? And I felt like that was my opportunity to give to others, to relieve the pain from myself, just give to others. And I felt like it gave me an opportunity to hear somebody else's story that's truly struggling. I felt like I was struggling, but to hear someone else's struggle made me realize my struggle is not as bad as what I thought it was. So I decided to say, hey, every day, well, every chance I get, I'm going to give to the homeless. I'm going to give them my shoes. I'm going to give them clothes. I'm going to give them food, water. I'm going to give it to them. And because I feel like it was a necessity, because I feel like I believe in a higher power. And if I believe in a higher power, how do I not know that these individuals are not that higher power that I constantly drive by and I constantly ignore? So I felt like it was only right. So I got in the classroom 2 years ago, and I felt like our students needed us. And I can't continue to preach that our kids need us and I'm not being a part of the solution. So I jumped in a classroom and said, all right, it's time to make a difference. So that's what I've been trying to do.
Awesome. Good to hear. So do you consider yourself an activist? Do you work in the community?
Well, yeah, I work I say very closely within the community, mostly just within, within my within my part of district. Been starting to work a lot with schools. Prior to me running for office, I did a lot of working with a lot of small business community and interacting with the locals, a lot of the school. Since I've had I guess, devotion towards activism for quite a while, and whenever it was not just me, but I guess it kind of runs in the family as well. I have sisters, and then we're all very very active members of the community. Wherever we feel injustices, we like to step in. We like to speak out and help people out as much as possible within our realms of possibilities.
Yes, of course.
So yeah, I consider myself more like a community organizer as well. I work with caucuses and I within the Libertarian Party. So I help run some of their social media platforms, and I give out a lot of information to my community.
That's great. So would you consider your campaign a grassroots?
Oh yeah, definitely consider my campaign a very grassroots campaign. One of the main purposes of my campaign is to go out there and listen to the community, because people, not only do people have questions, some people, they might have the correct answers as well. If we listen, they might have a solution for a problem that we thought we didn't have. You don't know what kind of background your constituents are from if you don't have the time to go out there and actually talk to them. Like, you don't know the kind of experiences that they had. You don't know if they could, how they can help out, because we're in a society that just wants. Sometimes we want the government to come in and help us out and make this better, but sometimes it's not going to take that. Bureaucracy takes a long time. The legislative process is long. And the way that bills become law, it goes in and out of committees. Sometimes you have to, things need to be rewritten. They didn't like it. It gets thrown out. And so, if we start to if we start to empower our communities to
Exactly.
become more autonomous,
Yes.
then we can help grow. We can help. We can help with whatever projects, whatever needs to be done. Poverty is a big problem in a lot of communities and all over Houston. Income inequality, that's all those things can be solved if we could just have community markets, for example. It's hard for somebody to start a small business here if you don't have enough capital, if you don't have enough money. And so if we start to grow small, help one another out, if we're able to help people get to these resources that they need, because it's in the end it's what it is. They can't access this capital. They can't access what is needed to help grow and to help grow as a whole. Because if we're expecting corporations to come into our communities and be the ones that provide our jobs, once these corporations fail, the jobs are gone. We've seen what happened to Toys R Us. There's a Toys R Us in my district that closed down. Everybody there is out of a job. Okay, we're seeing GE move out. We've had several piping companies move out. Whenever the prices of oil dropped, a lot of our companies started to shut down and downsize. And what ended up happening is mass joblessness in people that only had one trade, and they didn't have any other skills. So they couldn't. There's a mismatch in the job market. And so we have people with good degrees that aren't able to go, or people that depend on the boom bust cycles in order for them to be able to get a job, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. Um, so, Mr. Patton, can you tell us more about the changes you seek to make politically in the community?
So I personally believe that everybody's been put on this earth to solve a problem. And I believe the world is full of them. And if we all took a problem to solve, the world would be a better place. Um, I feel like running as in any elected official position at all, I feel like there's problems to be solved. I feel like a lot of times our people aren't empowered and they're leaning too heavy on the government. And they're wanting the government to solve the problems that we can really solve as organizers or activists. And my thing is, I'm not going or running to solve a problem per se. I'm more so just being your voice to be able to say that, hey, in this community, this is how they feel. And regardless of how I feel personally, if I'm running as state rep, I have to understand my personal feelings might not match with the community, and I have to go be the voice for the community. So whether that be I'm for marijuana but my community's not, I understand that my vote has to go with my community and not how I feel as a person. And I think a lot of our elected officials don't do that. I think they vote based off of how they feel and not rather than how their community feels or the outlook or the input of the community. And I think that goes back to what Pete was saying when it comes down to actually listening to the community. And when I think of a state rep, how many of them has been to an HOA meeting? You know, when you're talking about taxes on your property, how many of them go to the MUD meetings? But we're quick to say what somebody else's job is. But sometimes it might take you in your role to make that difference. And I think that's what makes me say that, hey, I think state rep might be the place for me, because some of the laws that need to be changed from the ground level and not so much at the top. And when you start looking at your elected officials, you think they have so much power at the top, but they forget about the ground surface of what it looks like to put the roots in the ground and to get that flower. So that's what makes me say, all right, it's time to truly understand. And I think just looking at education is a prime example of so many people get it wrong. You know, they worry about public school, charter school. To me, right now, just for education, when you think deep into it, there's $1 billion industry within education that no one talks about, and that's tutoring. No one talks about it, and it's not regulated. You don't have to be a certified teacher to tutor. We're missing that mark. Where's the legislation based off of that? And the reason why I say that is because if we go to River Oaks and we talk about tutoring, they're not talking about tutoring to catch up. They're talking about tutoring to see how far my kid can get ahead. That's a big difference. When I go to Third Ward and I say tutoring, they're saying I don't need tutoring because I got to be in a class, but your tutoring is to catch up because all of a sudden you failed. There's a big gap in that. So now you're looking at River Oaks, they're paying $500 an hour for a tutor to get their kids ahead, which we're not regulating because 9 times out of 10 is probably tax-free money to a teacher. But then you come to Third Ward and Fifth Ward and say, hey, we need a tutor to come into the classroom to catch our kids up. There's the problem. It's not the teacher, because I feel like you can go to any district you want and teach a kid to the best of your ability and that kid will excel. However, if you're teaching a kid to fill in their gaps, it's a problem. And that's the problem that we're not seeing, that there's a bigger issue that no one's talking about in education, which is $1 billion industry, and that's tutoring.
Interesting. Okay. Um, well, just to touch on briefly, but I know that you are a teacher. Are you in HISD?
I'm at a charter school, actually.
Okay. But have you ever taught in HISD?
I have not.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why I chose to answer that, the reason why I chose not to, is because the charter school I'm at is in my neighborhood. It serves 99.9% African Americans from low socially economic area. So my thing is, why not service the people that needs to be serviced best? Regardless if it's a charter school or a public school, these kids need to be serviced. So if I sat there and went outside of my community to go teach somewhere else for a kid that has a tutor that's probably going to teach them better than what I would teach them, why not go into my community, change it through the education system to have a leg to fight with?
Yeah, I agree completely. So, was your charter school, was it open on Thursday?
Yes, it was. It was open on Thursday.
Who made that decision?
I think it was the superintendent, to say the least.
Okay.
Superintendent of the charter schools district, because it's a charter school that's ran by the state.
Oh, okay. Okay. Do you agree with that decision?
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say the reason why I say yes is because Houston is tricky. anybody that knows Houston, it can rain on the north side and never rain on the south side. So how do you truly make a decision based off of, do you not know where it's going to rain? I feel like the best quality in a leader is a leader that can make a decision, right, wrong, or indifferent, but be able to stand up to say that I made a wrong decision. And I feel like for that moment in time, that was the right decision. Our superintendent closed school early due to the fact of what she saw coming. Now, I think that was the best decision to make, because now our kids aren't stranded at school at 4 or 5, 6 o'clock in the evening because we didn't make a decision because we wanted to ride something out. So I think ultimately the decision was great to go. However, now that we realize that we went, and it should have been a reverse decision, she made that decision instantly, and we got the kids home safely, and the staff got home safely. So I don't see the problem with decision making based off of what we had in front of us.
No, I agree. Unfortunately, HISD decided not to close early, and so kids were stranded. So I'm happy to hear that your superintendent, I feel, made a better decision to close schools early. So speaking on that, do you have any stance on the infrastructure here in Houston? It's been a consistent issue that Houston floods almost monthly now. And do you have any ideas on how to deal with that?
Oh, yeah, number one, definitely we would have to do with the corruption with our construction companies. I'm going to say that a few years ago, I was actually discussing this with somebody else about like what actually goes on with the money that is given to contractors. It's subcontracted numerous amount of times, so it goes into somebody's pockets through a company, subcontracted down until you get the final person to do the job. A lot of our construction work is subpar. It's not really a lot of the best. We're focusing on building highways and freeways, while roads are falling apart, our drainage systems aren't working, and this has been going on for years. It's going on for decades. So it's not something that we can say, oh, it just happened overnight. The infrastructure crumbled overnight. It's been crumbling. We've just been putting the money into the wrong things. If anything, we've been giving them too much money to play with. We've been allowing them to just go out there and roam and do whatever they want with these like basically free checks that they get from the government. That's the real people that we should be going after, reducing. We don't need to be giving contracts to people that we know are going to be misspending the money. Because you can look at these reports. You can get anybody financial reports. You can audit a lot of these companies. You have to have some kind of good standing. If you actually look at the project plans and you're saying, oh wow, why are you guys spending so much on this, and then you go out there, this contract has been subcontracted a numerous amount of times, the job is not done, or whatever troubles that you come into. And so we have a problem with our construction companies, and we have another problem with like developing. We had a lot of people, they allowed development in known flood zones. That's something that I'm not sure. That's something that now we're realizing, oh, it was a mistake. Of course it was a mistake. It was a mistake to begin with. You got too greedy. You wanted to make more money. You wanted to inflate property value, in order and build more shopping strips or commercial areas, specifically in my district, and it's something that everybody sees going on. My district is very rural. We have a lot of trees, a lot of forestry, and we know that cutting trees down is not good for flooding. It's not good for erosion. Yeah, it's not good for the land in general. It reduces our oxygen levels. Plants are very, very important. They're extremely important, and so we have a mixture of overdeveloping. We have the infrastructure that's not being that we're not focusing on. We're constantly building freeways and highways. We're not putting enough back into the community. We're taking, if anything, we just keep taking more, and we're bleeding the people dry, and then we're leaving them with what? With nothing. So
Flooded streets.
That's it. Yeah, because everybody complains. Like you don't know how many people complain. It's like, oh, it floods over there, or it's uneven here, and people survey the land. We have geographers. Come on, we can't play ignorant about this. We know what needs to be. We can hire experts. There's the information is there. The resources there, tools are there. We're just not putting the money into it. So I would, it would be an overall reform. It would be a large scale reform. But one thing that I would really like to focus on is seeing how this money is being spent. Because we keep giving, like I said, we just keep giving more and more and more. Even the construction workers got a raise. I know that they passed a raise here for construction workers here in Houston. Okay, well, the only problem is now is that these are the same companies that we've been giving these contracts out that should have been fixing our things, that should have been focusing on certain projects, and we're not giving, and they're not doing it. So what we're doing is we're just giving them more money to spend. We're just giving them more of an excuse to rob us blind and not do anything about it. So it's a good thing that they, it's a good thing if they wanted to get paid more. But the only bad thing is that they're going to be we're going to be paying more to these companies because they're not going to downsize anything within their companies. They're not going to reduce their budgets. They're not going to reduce their wages. Like the person that doesn't, if you find the least productive employee and reduce the wage, the least productive employee, to be honest, is probably somewhere in the very top chain. Let's be realistic about this. And so, like I said, all they're going to do is fatten their checks up at the expense of the taxpayers.
Exactly.
So we just need to be relooking at the way that we give a lot of these state contracts as well. Because there's a difference between things under jurisdiction of the city, things that are jurisdiction under municipalities, and things that are jurisdiction of the state.
Okay. So what do you feel the biggest issues are in your district, and what do you intend to tackle first if you happen to become a representative for your district?
The first thing I would like to tackle is food insecurities. I live basically in a food desert. And one thing I do know from study is that kids can't properly be educated if they're hungry. People don't want to go to work if they're hungry. So I think when you talk about economics, it's a lot of things that we need to talk about besides the fact that a person's been to jail and they can't find employment, the fact that we don't have transportation to get them there. It's a lot of factors, but one main factor is that people are hungry. So who wants to go to work or school hungry, So I think that's one of the main issues, to let people know I really care about you, I understand you, and I hear you. When you start thinking about things like that, most people won't think about that, especially if you're a state rep in an area that has food. Do you ever think about that food is an issue? No, probably not. I believe that a lot of our state reps miss the mark because they have big-time jobs, so they're not worried about the food because they know that they can go anywhere to go shopping for that food. So things like that is number one. Number two, I want to look at the development of my area and see how many African American contractors are being brought in, because I feel like a lot of times that pay issue comes into the fact that African American business owners are not being considered. And I feel like at least 25% of my district should be represented by black-owned companies. And I believe that strongly. So education is another fight that I'm going to go and fight tooth and nail for, because I feel like it's not the only way to get ahead, but it's a great way to get ahead and to understand your true value and why education matters, because now you're looking at, even if you're talking about a trade, that's education. Education just isn't, I'm going through 12th grade. It's more to education than just that. So my thing is, I want to tackle education across the board, not just one little part, but across the board. I also want to get rid of standardized tests, because standardized tests don't tell me much about who you are and how productive you're going to be for society. I feel like that's a key to the prison to school pipeline, is who can we get kicked out of school? Because if you're not in school, you're on the streets. So, and if that's the case, that becomes a problem for those hardworking people that's going to work from 8 to 5 to come home, to a home that's been burglarized or broken into because a kid don't have anything else to do because they're not in school. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about measures of how we can truly begin to, um, I hate the word punishment, but redirect students in school to be more positive than negative.
Awesome. Um, so what do you have any ideas on education or any stances?
Well, yeah, for education, I know that one of the big things that I was actually discussing with it's kind of funny because I was discussing with the Libertarian Party online. We were talking about autonomous schools, like community schools, instead of having because we know a lot of the budget for a lot of our schools, a lot of the money goes into the administrative positions. It doesn't go directly to the faculty, the student, the teachers, just custodians, the people that are kind of like the people that basically grease the wheels to keep the machine going. We keep the money concentrated at the very top levels of our administrative positions, and that's a big problem because they're not the ones that are teaching your children. It's the teachers that are teaching your children. They're the ones that are helping out with the curriculum. And so if instead of having schools that were ran by, like the way that our schools are currently run, instead they're ran by a coalition of parents, students, teachers, and professors from higher education universities. If we can have something like that, that'll be a lot better. And now we'll probably save a lot of money too. If in the long run, definitely, because we're going to be talking about superintendents they get paid incredible amounts of money. We all know that there's a lot of corruption going on in a lot of our districts right now, and there's a lot of money going missing. We know HCC also had a scandal, I think, or a few years back. All of our schools are having these scandals where we have people working in there. They're either taking money or they're giving themselves a lot of money that they shouldn't be giving them. They should be giving to the schools, or or they're buying unnecessary equipment for the schools that aren't really going to benefit the students. And that, if we see where we can start cutting things, if we start cutting the right things instead of the wrong things, then we'll probably be able to move forward.
I disagree with you slightly. I disagree because, number one, I feel like there's not enough money in education. Number two, I feel like if a teacher's teaching towards the test, it's always going to be a kid pass or fail. But I feel like when we grew up, it wasn't a such thing as a test. We understood what it was like to be outside, to understand what birds are. We was counting birds rather than actually sitting there counting 1, 2, 3. We learned how to count in different ways. And I feel like if our education system gets revamped to understand what it is to teach a kid that's a Gen Z and not a millennial, it's two different things. Their struggles are totally different than our struggles. Okay, let's talk about the pay. When I think about pay, I think of pay in time. I don't personally believe a teacher should be paid more. And I'm teaching. And a lot of people look at me like, what? I feel like, give me my Friday. Let me have off Friday, because if you're not a teacher, you don't understand that you're really working 10 hours a day. And people don't understand that, because when those kids go home, we don't go home. And when we do go home, we're grading papers. So my thing is, give me some time, because I understand as a taxpayer, if I have to pay more taxes for a teacher pay raise, I'm going to be more likely to want more from you. Why are any kids failing if I'm giving you a pay raise? So I don't think a lot of people understand education anymore. Yes, you went through an education system, but do you truly understand it? And I agree with you when you say that it should be a partner deal, because I feel like, yes, I should teach you, but also your parents should be at home teaching you as well. So it should be a collaborative effort in teaching a child. It shouldn't be, I'm putting all this onto a teacher, and when I get home, it's not like that. But when we live in a capitalist society, and the parent has to go to work, and she's working sometimes 2 or 3 jobs just to make it, can you really expect her to want to teach that child? And I think that goes down to a lot of the issues that's been embedded in us from years and years and years to come, because a lot of people don't understand of a solid family nucleus and how a 2-parent household can truly benefit a child rather than a single parent home. And I'm not knocking anyone in their lifestyle. So let me clear that up. That's not what I'm doing. But we have to understand that it takes a village. And that village is a lot deeper than one or two people. And until we really understand that as a people, we're going to continue to struggle because we're not doing this together. We're doing it as a bunch of individuals.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. It does. It definitely takes a village. I disagree when you say there's not enough money in education. Public education is $1 billion industry. Like there was recently a district here in Texas that the district had so much money that they built a water park because they had so much
So,
excess money.
the question is, where did the money come from? See, what we fail to understand is if you're looking at Kashmir and you're looking at Bel Air, they could be getting the same amount of money from the state, and Bel Air is going to have a lot more money than Kashmir. And it's not because the state gave them more money, it's because their alumni gave them much more money. So can you get mad at this school sitting here because they have more resources to money than this school right here? So that's something to think about. So my thing is, if the money is spread equally, we can't really be upset because at this point in time, it's not the state that gave that school more money than the other.
Um, that's not entirely true.
Why it's not?
The state definitely gave them more money or allocated them more funds. It's something about the way funds are allocated for each school district. And Houston, I know personally, has a very big issue with attendance, and therefore they consistently lose money because kids just aren't attending consistently. And so even though the kids are there, technically their attendance is so poor that it causes individual schools, and then it causes district-wide money to be lost.
So when you go to the valley, they don't have as much money as HISD. HISD would be considered a rich district. When you look at Dallas, that's going to be considered a rich district. When you go down to the valley and you go to like Del Valley, those districts are suffering because they don't have as many kids. So since our current formula is based off of the number of students you have in your district, that's something that we have to look at as something. Should we change the formula how we fund schools, because now it's based off of how many students you have. Houston has a lot more students than Del Valley. However, Del Valley is getting the same amount of money. So if you're talking about, let's just easy math, $10 a student, right? So if you got 1 million students at $10 versus a district that has 25 students, of course this district is going to hurt a lot more than HISD. So I think it boils down to the formula of how we're actually giving money out to the districts. Now I think district superintendents might be more of an issue than anything else because they have the ability to say what school gets what money.
Also, property taxes come into play when you're looking at districts and schools and the amount of money that they have. Is that something that you're willing to address? Earlier you were
Oh, yeah.
discussing that.
Well, yeah, we have in the state of Texas, education and property are very much intertwined. Very much intertwined. Along with there's several aspects of the state that just kind of they overlap with one another. Property taxes being one, in that we've been constantly, we don't know what we're doing at this point. The state doesn't know what it's doing because they promise one thing, they do it, and then the opposite comes out. They're basically lying to their constituents. It's not against the law for your representative or your senator or I don't know, even your president to lie to you. It's not. It's not illegal. They can tell you whatever they want, but if you were to lie to the government, that would be a serious offense. And so they're going to be telling you one thing to try to sway your vote in one direction, and they're going to try to build a certain reality around that. So where you think that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. What's happening here in the state of Texas. They keep promising to reduce property taxes. They keep promising to do this, and while at the same time they're cutting budgets in schools. For example, one of the districts and school districts in my district, in my house district, is the Klein School, and we're seeing and I'm hearing people talk about how they're cutting funding from Klein. Klein has been getting budget cuts. Specifically, the school that I'm talking about was the school that I graduated from. Klein Forest has been getting budget cuts since I was in school there. It's been 10 years since I graduated. So they're still cutting the budget to this point. And the schools are getting worse. Property taxes haven't gone down. People are complaining that they're paying more and more and more because if you reduce one thing but you inflate your property value, you're still going to pay more. Like it's law. It's how math works. Those are numbers work. Definitely, we need to do something about large scale reform. There's I could go on and talk about property taxes or property for a while. But one of the main things is we need to have more people to work on this. This is not a one-person issue that one person can just come in and solve. We need to have a good amount of people to just come into the conversation and talk about it. Because the problem is with property doesn't just come down to property taxes, but also people's homes that are being taken away, gentrification, development, you name it. It's a very multifaceted issue that it's not just one thing's going to be the solution, but it's probably one of those things that's going to be a multi-step, it's going to be a transitionary period into what we can actually do with property. Because nobody likes paying for property once and having to keep paying for it again. It's like you're renting your land to the state, which is what technically private property is. Private property is technically land that the state gave you a piece of paper for, and now so they give you that piece of paper, you pay for it, and because of that, nobody can come into your property. So that's where I'm saying it interlaps, because we have law enforcement coming, and that law enforcement and property are also tied into that. Because if you don't have that title of the state telling you, hey, this is your private property, somebody can come in and take you out of your property, like evictions, for example. And it's just kind of like, it's a rabbit hole, it just keeps going and going and going, because then we have eminent domain here in the state of Texas and civil asset forfeiture, where the state is technically taking your stuff at this point, stuff that they gave you, and then they take it back. So we have a whole mess all around. Like it's a big mess all around, because a lot of it just contradicts itself. It doesn't make sense how these things are working and how they're still allowing them to work. It's here in Houston. I know that we're having a problem with people's homes getting seized and being taken by like other companies. They're doing all these kind of they're like filing paperwork to try to pay people's taxes on homes, and they say that they're empty or vacant for a while, and then sometimes there's people there. A lot of times, most of the time, there's people living in there, and they get kicked out of their homes, and so they're using the court systems against us, and we're seeing how companies are using the state against its own population.
I think the property that we should start talking about is technology property, and how these big data companies taking our social media presence and getting paid off of it. And I think that's the property that we really need to start paying attention to. And the reason why I say that is because plenty of people in my district don't own property. So it's not affecting them technically. So the people that's it affecting is the rich. So I don't mind property taxes, and in a sense, shall I say, because most of the people in my district, they're not having that problem. But what I can say is their data is being breached daily, and we have no laws on what companies can do with the data they received from our social media. And I think that's a bigger issue in the African American community that no one's talking about, and how you're being targeted based off of what you're looking at on social media. So that's the property I think that we need to begin to protect, because if we don't begin to protect that, a lot of people are going to be truly lost in this world. So I think, social media property and technology and intellectual property needs to be more protected.
Interesting. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we definitely big data is definitely here to stay. Unfortunately, right now we have a problem with not just Google, Facebook, you name it. We are gold mines to technology companies, and we don't realize that. There's a saying that they have saying it's if it's free, you're the product. Okay, so social media is free, except unless you play games or whatever. But social media is free because they're taking your data. It's a breach of data, and they're making money off of it to make more money off of you, because what they're doing is they're using you to target you for ads or for things that you might want to buy. And all it's doing is enriching certain companies and not helping enrich our community. Instead of using, if we had more autonomy over this data, more of a decision making process over the data, then especially if it's being used in that manner to target us. If it wasn't being used, and if it was being used beneficially, it's a whole different story. But we also have to think that Facebook and Google are private companies. They are not, you know, public companies. They're companies owned. They have shareholders, and ultimately the decisions are theirs, not ours. Unfortunately, not ours to make. Signing those terms and conditions, and choosing to be active in these platforms gives them free reign over our data, and unless we're active in these platforms, a lot of times we're kind of out of the loop of what's going on in our mainstream culture, or we can't interact with society in the same way that we can, because everybody's so caught up and so connected to the internet nowadays. You reconnect with friends online, you reconnect with family members online, and in a sense, it seems like it's a little bit predatory, because they're kind of giving you almost like you're being pushed into a corner where you kind of have no other option but to just take that breach of data. It's not just private companies that do it. We know that when the United States has a mass surveillance program going on. If you know who Edward Snowden is, if you know who Chelsea Manning is, if you know who Julian Assange is, if you know that there's some serious things going on with our country, especially whenever it comes to privacy. We don't have privacy anymore. There's nothing that can be private, and that's more of an issue. It's more of, to me, we should tackle it on the government if it's coming from the government, more than if we're doing it with companies. Because when it comes to companies, we can't do anything about it, but we can tell the government to not be doing this to its citizens. We can do that. We do have that authority to be able to say, hey, look, the people don't want to be, we don't want to be a part of a mass surveillance program. Nobody's doing anything wrong here in this country. And if anything, like any of the laws that they think we're breaking are, what we call victimless crime laws. Laws that aren't really going to harm anybody, that we're not going around and hurting people, and it just doesn't make any sense.
I agree. Okay. Switching topics, but your views and stance on ICE and their consistent presence in our community.
Well, I have a huge problem not just with ICE but with Customs and Border Patrol as well, and it's something we don't talk about Border Patrol as much as we talk about ICE, but Border Patrol was the first one to shoot and kill somebody, recorded. I think they shot and killed a Guatemalan migrant, and point blank in the head, out in the middle of the streets. Okay, and the incidents that we had with ICE, I can't remember what state it was, but it was in a parking lot. The fact that we already have this kind of violence, and we have a militarized a very militarized border patrol, very militarized ICE for no reason. We're just terrorizing communities because a lot of times people just want to work. The whole reason why people even migrated from other countries because their home countries were destabilized a lot of times by the United States. Uh, we forget that Ronald Reagan's administration was complicit in the Guatemalan massacre, which is the massacring of indigenous Mayan people, and we overthrew Pinochet. We imposed dictators. We put Pinochet in charge in Chile. We in Honduras, the most recent one, the Obama administration was the one that overthrew, I think, the current president, the president of Honduras, and put in another leader that they deemed more suitable to be able to do whatever they wanted them to do in the country. And in Mexico, we destabilize its agricultural business with trade agreements such as NAFTA. NAFTA was one of the big ones that we even had. There was an uprising on January the 1st of 1994 that was because of NAFTA, and you had the Zapatista movement that in Mexico that a lot of people don't know. A lot of young people had no idea that this was happening in Mexico. Most young Mexicans don't even know who the Zapatistas are because they're still in existence, and they're in an autonomous zone within Mexico that don't take any help from the government, and that they live sustainably. They farm and they trade within themselves. And people go visit. They do have a tourist business, I guess. People are attracted to tourism because of the kind of activism that they have. The concept of autonomy is something that we don't really think because we've always seen a government as kind of like something that's always been around us, and we never think about the possibility of when it won't be there, like when we won't have something overseeing us the way that it is, because now we're in the era of Big Brother. We're no longer we're no longer in the same boat like our parents or great parents were, or the people that were here, the first people here in this continent. Our technology has grown so invasively that we're under watch, and either we're all gonna be either a part of this, kind of like being watched over system, or we can all just pull away and decide that maybe we want authority about what's going on around here.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, After traveling out of the country, I went to Europe actually this summer and spent a while there. I'm starting to realize that in America, I think we're more free than what we believe we are, to a point where we began to trap ourselves. Um, and I say that because while I was in Amsterdam, they're not allowed to carry guns. And to us, that's an amendment, a Second Amendment right to be able to carry a gun. Um, and it was a different sense of peace there. Not saying that I believe that we should not have our Second Amendment right, but I believe that we're so free that we don't know what free is anymore. And I think it's a concept that we have to reevaluate because a lot of us aren't free at all. Um, and I'm speaking of African Americans per se, and I would believe in our Latinas are not free either. I believe that they gave us the amount of freedom that they believe we're allowed to have, but we're not truly free. When I went there, we would say that they're not free because they don't have the right to carry guns. Their government took certain things away from them, but at the same time, their quality of life is 10 times better than ours right now because now they have free health care. We don't. We're struggling. There's people dying daily because they can't get proper health care. So are we truly free in that sense? Um, when you're talking about marijuana legalization in Amsterdam, it's free. Well, not free. It's legal. So they don't have that type of issue that we're dealing with of people sitting in jail for something that's basically legal today. So it's a lot of things that we need to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, we need to take a second look at this. It's not okay, and we shouldn't allow it to be okay. So my aspect on that is I just wish that more people were able to travel outside of their current world to see something different. And a prime example, I watched a Netflix series with Will Smith, and he talks with astronauts and how they view the world once they come back from outer space. It's totally different only because they was able to see the world in a different light. So now it's totally different to them. So I feel like if we were to get some of these same people that's trapped in Third Ward that never been outside of Houston, Texas, Third Ward, and took them somewhere different and allowed them to see something different, I think you would get a different result.
Interesting. So do you have any views on ICE personally, or?
Wow, I think it's wrong. Point blank, period. I believe it's wrong. But I also believe in America, someone has to be a slave because that's the way our system is set up. So at this point in time, African Americans, Latinos are at the bottom. And at this point, it's a fight to who's going to be the working class. And it's simple as that. When you think about some of the issues, I don't believe we should have a wall. No, I don't. But when you go look at Canada, Canada just don't let immigrants in. A lot of countries don't just let immigrants in. No matter who they are and who's been oppressing them, they don't let them in. And that's because they're capitalist. And that's America. America looks at the standpoint of we don't want people in that's not going to push America forward. That's an issue to me because we're a melting pot. We shouldn't be looking at someone to be our slave and who's going to work for the less money. Like, we shouldn't look at that at all. Like, money should be equal across the board. Everyone should have a right to make as much money as they want to make here in America. And to me, that's one of the biggest issues. And I feel like when I say travel abroad and see different things, you see it in Europe too. Because if you don't speak Dutch, you're at the bottom of the totem pole. And do I feel like that's right? No. I feel like the treatment of people needs to change altogether. And I feel like that's why I feel like I'm totally against ICE and what's happening at the border because there's no way that you should be treating anyone the way they treat people. And I'm just so far against that, the bad treatment of people. I think it should be love across the board. Bottom line, period. No walls at all. When I was in Europe, you're free to drive through any country you want. So why not let America be a country of freedom? You claim it's freedom, so let it be freedom. So yes, I'm totally against it.
Interesting. Okay. I had something that I was gonna say and then I forgot it.
I would actually like to make a comment about
Go ahead.
Canada.
Okay.
Canada's still a colonial state. The United States is still a colonial state. Mexico is still a colonial state. Pretty much any country in this part of the hemisphere is a colonial state. They were all built by empires that came overseas and decimated the indigenous communities and in here, and they're still oppressing them as well. Canada is very oppressive towards their indigenous communities. Canada has a problem with missing indigenous women being murdered, and so does the United States, and so does every other country. So does every other country that we have here. Like it's all around. It's all around bad. They're all big.
I feel like we have to know our history to truly understand it. Number one, when you go to Europe, they don't talk about the slave trade at all. But when we come to America, they don't like to talk about slavery either. But it's our history, period. Why is it a problem of our history? And I feel like right now what's happening is I feel like history is repeating itself through a different lens. And and if we don't wake up to understand history and understand that there's a problem there, and no one wants to accept that African Americans, there was a problem. Why does African Americans the only one that sees that slavery was a problem? You go to Europe, you ask them about it. Oh, we don't want to talk about it. You come to America, white privilege doesn't exist. That's our problem. So now I believe that history is repeating itself just once again through a different lens, and we're accepting it because now we're used to it. We're used to that happening. I believe that there's not many organizers out there anymore. People are not organizing people. And the reason why I say that is because the police officer can go gun down an African American. We can go rally 15 seconds, I say 15 days later, we forgot about that person. So we're not organizing to fix anything. We just we just hoopla to bring light to a situation. And I feel like we have to really get in and fix the problem.
And that's the reasons why I do not like. That's why I'm a big advocate for like the Second Amendment, because politicians today have no right of saying, "Hey, we want to take your weapons away," but at the same time, we have law enforcement in the streets that are we have fatal traffic stops. Come on, that is ridiculous here.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. So we have a lot of issues here in America that we don't really want to talk about or even bring into the table, and this is the opportunity to do it.
I remembered what I wanted to say. When you brought up that you don't feel like there should be a cap on what you can make here in America, so are you against a maximum wage?
No, not at all. I feel like, I feel like everybody should have a living wage, point blank, period. Regardless if it's $20, if it's $15, I think we need to catch up with the times.
Most definitely.
If property tax is going to rise, so does the minimum wage to rise. If I'm going to pay more, I should be able to earn more.
Awesome. So the maximum wage, of course, some people have said the top employees should only be able to make 100 times more than what the bottom employees make. So Jeff Bezos, who what did he clear, like 40 billion this year? Like, what do you think about that?
We have to understand how to play the game. We're getting beat at a game that they created. So go learn how to play the game and beat them at the game. I feel like most people go get LLCs. When you're truly educated, you don't get an LLC, you get a corporation. Because corporations, 9 times out of 10, don't pay taxes. LLCs pay taxes. So we have to understand where we're losing and figure out how to win. And do I feel like they should not be taxed? I think they should be taxed. But at the end of the day, if we're going to play the current game, he's right, we're wrong. Well, I'm not going to say we're wrong, but he's right. He's doing what he needs to do to win the game.
You just buy yourself the best accountant money can buy. When you buy yourself the best accountant that you can buy, you don't have to pay the government anything. Because that's what it is. No, they don't pay taxes because they use very known accounting tricks.
I guarantee you, you go look at Google, you go look at Amazon, you look at Facebook, none of them are LLCs. All of them are corporations.
Of course. There. Well, thank you, guys. This has been Green Watch. I am your host, Treasje Mitchell. And in the words of Cornel West, you can't lead the people if you don't love the people. You can't save the people if you don't serve the people. Thank you. And please watch the government because the government is watching you. Have a great evening.
With power, here they come. International loan sharks, backed by the guns of market-hungry military profiteers, whose word is a swamp and whose brow is smeared with the blood of the poor. Who rob life of its quality, who render rage a necessity.